People say the first 2 minutes of a presentation are the hardest part. What advice do you give to presenters?
I think, yes, maybe even less than 2 minutes actually to make that vital first impression. And I think I would want to work with my client to try and break that down a little bit into what's really going on with the audience and indeed what happens when we communicate with people. A lot is based on body language, non-verbal communication. That may be as much as 60 to, some people say even 90% of our communication is non-verbal communication, which is rather an amazing statistic. But certainly we do take in impressions from the sound of the person's voice, their facial expression, for example, their posture, the way in which they use the room, the space that they have. All of those things combine, really, the way they dress. We will put together a composite picture. Usually these messages are not viewed independently. They're usually seen as clusters of behaviour. And we will build up an image very, very quickly of who we think that person is and what they are and who they are, before we really even take in much of what they've got to say, although, of course, those first few words are also essential. We think about posture, for example, the way one stands, the way in which you can be upright but not rigid, the way you take charge of the space, for example, rather than hiding behind a table or a lectern. You try to get that direct contact with your audience. A problem comes, of course, with PowerPoint, where people want to stay near their laptop to change the slides, and obviously the message is very simple: just use a remote and that will liberate you from your laptop. But also the way that we use our eye contact to scan the room rather than just look at the first few rows, so that everybody feels as though there's a conversation going on, no matter how far back they are or whether they're at the sides of the room. The way in which we use modulation in our voices, you know, the kind of intonation that we use. There is also sometimes perhaps a tendency to want to shout in order to be heard in a large room. If there's a microphone, try it out before the audience arrives. See how your voice sounds. Get that feel for how you're going to sound, how you're going to come across, and modulate your voice accordingly. But also remember how important intonation is. English is the language of Shakespeare, after all. So we have that capacity to produce all sorts of light and dark shades in our voices that add interest and get the audience really paying attention. And I think also we need to think very carefully about how we control our gestures. Certainly all of us have perhaps particular mannerisms that we might use, but you know, the flicking of the hair, or the nervous fidgeting with a bracelet or a ring, or the constant adjustment of the suit jacket, or the nervous cough can become a distraction to the audience. And all of that can happen in the first minute or so. A minute is a long time when you're speaking.